Illyra Voss stood at the back of the Moonstone Cathedral, half hidden behind a tall marble pillar. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows and painted soft colors across the stone floor, but none of that beauty reached her heart. She was watching the man the moon goddess had marked as her mate slide a silver ring onto another woman's finger. Kian Draven, alpha of the Ashwood Pack, did not look her way. He had not looked at her in 3 years, not since the night he stood before the entire Pack Council and rejected the bond between them. He had called her unworthy of a throne. Those words still lived inside her, quiet but sharp, like a splinter that never fully healed. Now he was crowning Selene Marrow as his Luna, and the Pack was cheering as though the past had never happened, as though Illyra had never existed at all. She told herself she had only come to prove she could survive it. She smoothed the front of her plain gray dress. She had not bothered dressing for a celebration that was never meant to be hers. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, Illyra felt her whole body go still, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. No one did. Of course no one did. She was the only one in that cathedral who remembered what it felt like to be chosen by Kian, and then unchosen just as fast. She turned to leave, before the tears could embarrass her further. She did not make it to the doors. Leaving already? The voice was low and calm, carrying a quiet confidence that did not belong to an ordinary man. She turned, and found Ronan Ashcombe leaning against the cathedral wall, arms crossed, as though he owned the very stones beneath his boots. In a way, he nearly did. Ronan was the Alpha King of the Northern Wilds, a vast kingdom that bordered 3 packs, and bowed to no council. He was also Kian's oldest rival, a fact that made his presence here both strange and dangerous. "I do not see how that concerns you," Illyra said, straightening her shoulders. "It does not," Ronan admitted, "but I dislike watching a woman get thrown away for politics." Illyra's chest tightened. "What do you mean by that?" Ronan tilted his head toward the altar, where Kian was sealing his vows with a kiss that looked more like a handshake than a promise. "Selene's father controls the eastern trade routes. The timing of this wedding is very convenient, do you not think?" Illyra's jaw tightened. She had suspected as much for weeks, ever since the engagement was announced with strange speed, but hearing it said aloud by a stranger made the wound feel fresh again. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve the truth, and because I think you already knew it, somewhere in your heart." Ronan's easy smile faded into something more serious. "I want you to stop wasting your worth on a man who never deserved it." "And what would you have me do instead?" Her voice came out sharper than she meant it to, but she did not take the words back. "Rule beside me." He said it plainly, without any grand gestures, as though he were offering her a cup of tea rather than a crown. For a moment, Illyra wondered if she had misheard him. "I have watched you for 2 years," he continued. "I have seen you handle the border disputes for the Voss territory, while your father took all the credit in the council meetings. I have read the trade agreements you quietly drafted, the ones that saved 3 villages from starving during the last harsh winter. You have the mind of a queen, Illyra, and no throne to match it. I am offering you one." Illyra laughed, though there was no real joy in the sound. It was sharp, almost bitter. "You do not know me." "I know enough," Ronan said gently. "And I know what a wasted mate bond looks like when I see one, yours included. I felt it too once. It leaves a mark that never quite fades, but it does not have to define the rest of your life." He held out his hand, not touching her, simply offering it, the way one offers a choice rather than a demand. "Come to the wilds," he said, "not as someone's consolation prize, as my equal. Give it 1 month. If, after that time, you still want nothing to do with me, you may leave with my carriage, my gold, and my word that no one will trouble you for it. I will not chase you. I will not send anyone after you. You will simply be free to go." Behind them, the cathedral erupted into applause as Kian and Selene were announced to the pack as mates and rulers. Illyra felt the old ache twist deep in her chest, familiar and heavy. But then, strangely, something else happened. The ache loosened, just a little, as though a fist that had been clenched around her heart for 3 years had finally begun to open. She looked down at Ronan's outstretched hand. She thought of every year she had spent making herself smaller, so she could fit beside a man who never once made room for her in return. She thought of all the meetings where her ideas were repeated back by someone else and praised, while she sat silent in the corner. She thought of the quiet nights she had spent convincing herself that being tolerated was the same thing as being loved. 1 month, she said finally, placing her hand in his. Prove to me you are not just another king who wants a name to use for his own purposes. Ronan's smile returned, softer this time, less like a challenge and more like relief. Then let us give them something to talk about. They left before the wedding reception began. By the time Kian noticed her absence, if he noticed it at all, Elira Voss was already crossing the border into the northern wilds, carried away from a life that had never truly welcomed her, and toward a crown she had never asked for. The journey took 3 days. Ronan did not rush her, and he did not fill the silence with empty conversation. When she wanted to talk, he listened, really listened, in a way that made her realize how rarely anyone had done that before. When she wanted quiet, he gave her that too, riding beside her carriage without a single complaint. On the first night, they stopped at a small inn near the edge of the forest. Elira sat by the fire, staring into the flames, and Ronan sat across from her, not too close, giving her space to breathe. Why did you really come to the wedding? She finally asked. You could have sent someone else to watch, or simply heard about it afterward. Ronan considered the question carefully before answering. I wanted to see for myself if the stories about Kian Draven's mate were true. I had heard whispers of a woman who negotiated better treaties than half the alphas in this region, yet was never given credit for any of it. I wanted to know if she was as remarkable as they said. And was I? More, he said simply, and something in his voice made her believe him completely. The following days passed in a similar rhythm. Slowly, without either of them announcing it, trust began to grow between them, like a small green shoot pushing up through frozen ground. Ronan showed her his kingdom piece by piece, not as a king showing off his wealth, but as a man sharing something precious with someone he hoped would stay. He introduced her to the border villages, the healers, the farmers, the pack elders who had served his family for generations. He asked for her opinion on matters of trade and diplomacy, and unlike Kian, he actually listened to her answers and changed his plans when her reasoning made sense. By the second week, Elira found herself laughing in a way she had not laughed in years, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and unguarded. She caught herself smiling at small things, the way Ronan argued playfully with his advisors, the way he remembered small details about her, like her favorite tea, or the fact that she disliked crowded rooms. But the past was not so easily left behind. News traveled fast between packs, and it did not take long for word to reach Ashwood territory that Elira Voss had left with the Alpha King of the Northern Wilds. Kian, now married only weeks, arrived at the Wilds border with a small envoy, demanding to speak with her. Elira stood on the castle steps beside Ronan when Kian's messenger delivered the request. Her stomach twisted into knots, old fear and old hope tangled together in a way that made her feel dizzy. You do not have to see him, Ronan said quietly, standing close but not crowding her. You owe him nothing. I know, Elira said, but I think I need to. For myself, not for him. Ronan nodded, respecting her choice, even though she could see the concern in his eyes. Then I will be nearby if you need me. She met Kian in the castle garden, away from prying eyes. He looked tired, older than she remembered, though it had only been a few weeks since the wedding. Why did you leave? He asked, without any greeting. Do you understand what people are saying about you? About us? I left because you gave me no reason to stay, Elira said calmly. Her voice did not shake, and that surprised even her. You rejected our bond in front of everyone who mattered to me. You called me unworthy. What did you expect me to do? Wait quietly in the shadows while you married someone else for trade routes? Kian's face flickered with something that might have been regret, but it passed quickly, replaced by frustration. It was not that simple. There were pressures from the council, expectations from my father's old allies. You never understood the position I was in. No, Elira agreed. I never did, because you never once tried to explain it to me. You simply decided, and I was expected to accept it without question. I spent 3 years blaming myself for not being enough. It took someone else showing me basic respect to realize the problem was never me. Kian was silent for a long moment. And this Alpha King, he actually cares for you? Or is this just another game between rival kingdoms, with you caught in the middle? Alira thought about the question honestly before answering. I do not know everything about the future, Kian, but I know that in 2 weeks, Ronan has asked for my opinion more times than you did in 3 years. That tells me enough. Kian left the wilds that same afternoon, and Alira did not watch him go. For the first time in years, she did not feel the need to. That night, Ronan found her sitting on the castle balcony, looking out over the dark forest below. He sat beside her without a word. "Thank you," she said after a while, "for giving me the space to face that on my own terms." "You do not need my permission to protect your own heart," Ronan replied. "I only wanted you to know I was here, in case you needed someone." Alira turned to look at him, really look at him, the moonlight softening the sharp lines of his face. "The month is almost over," she said quietly. "It is," Ronan agreed, "and you are free to leave, as I promised. My carriage and my gold are yours whenever you wish." "What if I do not want to leave?" Ronan's eyes searched hers carefully, as though he needed to be certain before he let himself hope. "Then I would ask you to stay, not as a guest, and not as a political arrangement, but as my equal. Exactly as I offered from the very beginning. No titles owed, no debts to repay, only a choice, freely made." Alira felt tears gather in her eyes, but this time, they were not born of grief. "I choose to stay," she said, "not because I have nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in years, I feel like myself when I am here." 6 months later, when the Ashwood pack fell into a difficult trade dispute that Celine's father had quietly engineered for his own benefit, it was Queen Alira of the Northern Wilds who was called upon to help negotiate the peace. She arrived, not as Kian Draven's forgotten mate, but as a respected ruler in her own right, standing beside a king who trusted her judgment completely. Kian watched from across the negotiating table as Alira spoke with calm authority, resolving in a single afternoon what his own advisors had struggled with for weeks. He realized, far too late, exactly what he had thrown away the day he called her unworthy of a throne. Alira did not need his recognition anymore. She had already found something far more valuable, a place where she was seen, valued, and chosen every single day, not because tradition demanded it, but because someone had finally looked at her and decided she was worth choosing. And that, she had learned, made all the difference in the world.